the last, 20 years or so, the Navy has been operating in a very permissive environment, specifically with naval aviation. I mean, we've dominated the sky and we've focused a lot on supporting troops on the ground overseas. However, as times change and kind of the next threats that we're looking at, that's absolutely not going to be the case. My name is Jamie Schrock, call sign Paul Walker Jr., and I'm an adversary pilot at VFC-12. The mission of our squadron of VFC-12 is to support the fleet in their training, i.e. by being professional adversaries, giving them the most realistic simulation of other aircraft that threat nations may fly across the world.
I have the awesome privilege and the awesome responsibility of being the commanding officer of VFC-12. We take fully capable fighter aircraft airborne, simulating the most technologically advanced threats to the best of the airplanes and the pilots' aircrew's ability, and we fight the fleet, whatever mission they're training for. Those airplanes and those assets, those people need to go into combat prepared for those missions. And that's where VFC-12 comes in. That's where the professional adversary mission comes in, because you can't just sit at a classroom and think about aerial combat or defensive counter-air. You can't watch tape of the combat unfolding. You can't go to a whiteboard and teach like it's, long division. The active component, the regular Navy, has to get their reps in training. They have to sit in the airplane. They have to face opposition in aerial combat, whether that's beyond visual range or within visual range. And professional adversaries like Fighting Omars, like VFC-12, we give that to them. We take it as serious as life and death, their training, because once they leave our national waters, it is life and death. Squadron motto here is, we win today so that they win tomorrow. For this generation of, strike fighter aviation, for this generation, we can really trace our roots back to the consequence of the Vietnam War. And what happened in the Vietnam War is that the kill ratio, the amount of fighters that U.S. forces shot down, was unsatisfactory as compared to the amount of U.S. airplanes that were shot down. I don't know what the kill ratio is, but it wasn't good enough. So a gentleman by the name of Robert Alt did a study on the shortcomings of U.S. air combat, U.S. air dominance in the Vietnam War. And the consequence to that in the Navy was the creation of the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School, more commonly known as Top Gun. The U.S. Navy VFA community sends their best pilots and WIZZOs to get a graduate level training in strike fighter tactics. The duty that comes with graduating from the United States Navy Fighter Weapons School is to carry on the mission of strike fighter aviation via instruction.
And so I think that units like VFC-12 are that much more important, because the training we provide here hopefully makes those aviators that are going overseas to do our nation's bidding, it makes them ready to encounter anything that they might see anywhere across the world. And someday if an aviator who is trained against VFC-12 or trained against another adversary unit finds him or herself going up against an adversary that is a peer threat or even greater, and they come back safely to their families, that's what we want to hang our hat on as an adversary unit, in that we provided that training to make them ready to come home to their family at the end of the day. Yeah, we like to think the merge is typically where the intercept is going to stop. If the blue forces are doing everything right, that's kind of where it should end. So typically we're flying, hundreds of knots as we approach the merge. And then if you do make it to the merge and get into a turning engagement, now you're pulling up to 7.5 Gs, so 7.5 times the weight of your body is what you're feeling in the cockpit. All of that physical part, in addition to kind of the mental aspect of assessing what the other player is doing and applying your best game plan.
But in almost all of these cases, the rules of engagement involve the good guys, the blue air, to visually confirm that they are going to engage what we say are threat aircraft, the bad guys.
They're operating a lot of different systems. They're talking on sometimes up to 4 different radios while actually flying the plane, either in a visual formation or not in a visual formation, using all of the systems that they have available to them to make it to that merge unscathed.
What the adversary squadrons do is we will paint our airplanes in a different way. We're just going to look on, Google and pick out how other countries, we say threat nations of interest, paint their airplanes.
When the blue forces are flying and they go to emerge and they see an aircraft that doesn't look exactly the same, a lot of things are going to go through their mind at that point that wouldn't necessarily happen if they're doing the same intercept against the same aircraft over and over again. We like to think that that's going to provide that next level of realism for the blue forces as they're executing their mission.
That's why they know what threat aircraft look like from all of the aspects, nose on, platform. History has proven that you might have to be able to identify a fin flash. He's flying at 300 knots, that the Super Hornet from VFA whatever is flying at 300 knots. That puts the closure at 600 knots. That's not a ton of time to neck down all those details.
It's definitely an exhausting experience at the end, but it's probably the most fun thing that you could do in an airplane, in my opinion. It's kind of a sign of a good training exercise is when you pull the gear off and you're covered in sweat. You probably got something pretty significant out of that mission.
I was 12 years old when my pop took me to Marine Corps Air Station Miramar in San Diego to the air show. When I saw the Blue Angels, fell in love with airplanes and flying.
I started flying when I was about 16 years old, just flying a little Cessna, kind of in my hometown airport. For as long as I can remember, all I wanted to do was fly. That was kind of a life goal of mine from a very young age.
That is a common theme for people in the business. They loved flying or had family in flying.
My grandfather on my mother's side was in the Navy in World War II. I have some Navy family on my father's side as well, so we're a fairly Navy-heavy family. And so when I kind of combined the Navy with wanting to fly and wanting to serve, I think naval aviation was the perfect spot to do that.
I told you I was 12 years old and I saw the Blue Angels. Well, a family friend was a old Navy fighter guy. He was an F-8 pilot, an F-4 pilot, an F-14 pilot. And he'd come around the house and I was just gaga. And then what? How does this work? What do you do? What was that like? This man was so patient, so kind. All the time in the world for all of the questions.
There were a lot of hurdles to get to where I am today, but I think it's been my dream for a long time, so I'm happy to have gotten the opportunity to fly, and specifically to fly the F-18.
And it's really neat because we have a family friend who they have a 10-year-old son who's in love with airplanes, and he's nonstop questions, just like I was with Captain Bernard, nonstop questions. And his mom's like, oh my gosh, he should leave you alone. I'm like, this is exactly how it works. Because, as good or great or the best that this VFA, as good as they are, they're gonna come back and they're gonna graduate to whatever. And there needs to be inspired, motivated, qualified, new blood ready to do it and to do it well.